certainty it needs. Thank you.
Pleasure to take part in this debate. I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Cleethorpes. I'm delighted to follow the chairman of the Select Committee, and I'm even more delighted to have the Minister here so we can have this discussion, so thank you. The situation where we find ourselves, I think, with the GBR, Great British Railways initiative, has emanated from what was nothing short of a timetable disaster in May 2018. It affected large parts of the country in a very significant way, and it led my right honourable friend, the member for Epsom and Ewell, to basically take that first step and saying, actually, this doesn't work. This system doesn't click together, and it needs proper reform. That led, of course, to the Williams Review, and that piece of work, if I recall, commenced at the beginning of 2019, and we are now 4 years after that piece of work that having started. Admittedly, we've had COVID in the middle, which has made things more difficult, but I think the progress that we can see going ahead of us is unclear. The Secretary of State in the Bradshaw lecture that my honourable friend, the Chairman of the Select Committee, mentioned, did describe in that speech that the railway system was broken, and I would agree with him. There are many reasons why it has become so fractious. We have allowed the trade unions to have much more influence than they should have had. We had trade unions during COVID that told train companies they would not allow training of train drivers. It generated a deficit in the manpower requirement. It meant that many train companies, including Trans-Pennine Express, I suspect, and many others, having to cope with less train drivers than they required, therefore have a requirement on overtime that then meant that the influence and the power was with the trade unions, and particularly the train drivers' union, and we know that that is the case even today. Now, having been a member of the Select Committee since 2020, indeed under the chairmanship of my honourable friend, the Minister, we have had much debate and discussion about this at Select Committee with successive ministers, commencing, I think, in May 2021, March 2022, and October 2022, not just, of course, with ministers, but with senior officials, including the Permanent Secretary as well. And I think we have gotten to a place where we now, the industry, as well as the passenger and the taxpayer, now needs to see real progress as to what is going to happen, what can happen to improve our railways rapidly. We've talked a little bit this afternoon already about the need for legislation. Well, legislation is one way, but, not that I want to be a sceptic about it, but I don't think we're going to be seeing the legislation immediately. And even if we were, with the timescales of which we have to contend with before the end of this Parliament, the impact that that legislation will be able to make will be limited. And so today I would like to focus my remaining remarks on what actually is feasible to be done, rather than being concerned too much with what is unfeasible or unlikely to take place in this remaining Parliament. We know very well that the DfT is able to specify the core timetable that operators run today. That is part of the contractual arrangements. I am a huge advocate for releasing some of that specification to allow the private sector to bring back to our railways such innovation and commercial capabilities that we have seen previously to today. We see it currently. I recall reviewing the statement by First Group that its open access operations such as Hull Trains and Lumo, I think, have performed very well, and I'm a huge advocate for enabling that to happen, because it is now my concern, as someone who has worked within the railway for some 20 years before I was elected to this place, it is my great concern that there is now enormous uncertainty in an absolutely huge industry both in terms of effect of the economy, but also in terms of passenger experience. In my own constituency of West Dorset, Madam Chairman, I have two operators, South Western Railway and Great Western Railway, both of whom have had extended management contracts from the department to deliver train services. It is of great regret to me and my colleagues locally that there has been no consultation about the needs of the community and when those contracts are leased. And I hope that when the current contracts come to an end, if it's in this Parliament, that we might have that discussion. But in the absence of that consultation, could I have an ask of the Minister to maybe consider? Once upon a time, we ran summer Saturday trains, as my honourable friend, the member for Cleethorpes, mentioned, from the Salisbury, Sherborne, Yeovil line down to Weymouth. That was removed without consultation, and I'd be very appreciative if the Minister would ask his department to consider putting that in the service specification for the South Western Railway. And I'd also just like to say that the county town of Dorset, which is Dorchester, has suffered terribly over the last 2 or 3 years. We've been cut off, the whole county has been cut off from London on numerous occasions for a number of reasons, whether it's COVID and otherwise. The journey time for London from Dorchester is almost 3 hours. It used to be 2 hours 15, if I recall, in years past. I would very much appreciate it if my honourable friend the Minister would consider such improvements to the railway and ask Network Rail to consider those accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam